Tears are a universal language, but for a refugee from a dead world, they were a death sentence. Lena, a single mother hiding in the sleepy town of North Creek, knew this better than anyone. For 5 years, she had been a ghost, a whisper never showing the emotion that could betray her alien nature. But when her daughter's only link to a lost father, a strange crystalline music box, shattered on the floor, her facade broke with it. A wave of silent telekinetic grief erupted from her, and as she wept, she had no idea that her sorrow had just sent out a beacon, summoning a man whose own secrets were buried just as deep beneath the skin. The silence in Lena's small rented cabin was a carefully constructed fortress. It was a silence built of necessity, of 5 years spent looking over her shoulder, of teaching her daughter Maya to play with muted laughter and speak in hushed tones. They were ghosts in the damp, pine-scented air of North Creek, Washington, a town so small it was more a collection of secrets than a community. Lena's secret was just bigger than most. It was written in the stars she no longer dared to look at. Today the fortress was breached. It happened with a sickening crack that echoed louder than any sound she had ever allowed in their home. The object, a filigree sphere of iridescent crystalline metal, slipped from Maya's small hands. It wasn't a toy, not really. It was a memory keeper, a lullaby machine, a final gift from a father Maya would never know. For a human, it would have been a beautiful, intricate music box. For Lena, it was the last piece of Xylos, the last piece of him. It hit the rough-hewn wooden floor, and a spiderweb of fractures raced across its gleaming surface. The soft internal glow that pulsed in time with Maya's heartbeat flickered and died. The melody it had been playing, a soft, ethereal tune that held the sound of twin suns rising, stuttered into a discordant screech, and then fell silent. The fortress of Lena's composure crumbled with it. Maya's lower lip trembled, her wide, silver-flecked eyes filling with tears. "Mommy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" Lena knelt her hands, hovering over the pieces, a tremor running through her that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. On Xylos, her people were beings of logic and control. Emotion was a primal failing, a vulnerability to be mastered. Grief was a sickness. For 5 years, she had been the perfect Xylian refugee, suppressing every wave of sorrow, every pang of loneliness for the sake of their survival. She was a stone, a pillar, a shield for her daughter. But seeing that broken sphere, the last tangible piece of her mate Kaelin, was like watching him die all over again. A choked sound escaped her throat. It was foreign raw, her vision blurred, and the salty sting of tears, a biological reaction she had only ever read about in Xylian archives of primitive species, pricked at her eyes. She pressed her lips together, fighting a war within herself. Control. Do not feel. To feel is to be seen. To be seen is to be caught. But the dam broke. A single tear escaped, then another. A sob tore from her chest, silent, but violent, racking her entire frame. And with that sob, something inside her, a latent power she kept brutally suppressed, lashed out. The lights in the cabin flickered violently. The glass of water on the table vibrated concentric rings, disturbing its surface. Outside, the engine of her ancient Ford pickup, which had started a moment before, sputtered and died with a mournful groan. A wave of pure, unadulterated grief, sharp and potent, radiated from her in a way no human could ever perceive. It wasn't sound or light, but a psychic scream into the quiet fabric of the world. Maya, frightened not by the broken toy, but by her mother's terrifying sorrow, threw her arms around Lena's neck. "It's okay, Mommy. It's just a toy. We can fix it." Lena hugged her daughter back, her body trembling uncontrollably as she stared at the fractured remnants of her past. She had done more than just break a priceless artifact. In her moment of weakness, she had just screamed her location to anyone or anything that might be listening. She had just lit a beacon in the dark, and she could only pray that the monsters weren't the first to see the light. She rocked her daughter, burying her face in Maya's soft hair, the fortress of their silence, now nothing but ruins around them. The silence that returned after Lena's truck died was heavier than before. It was a dead final thing. She tried the ignition again, her hand unsteady. Nothing. Not a click, not a cough. Just the profound stillness of dead machinery. Of course, the emotional surge had fried the old truck's simple electronics. It was a common side effect of uncontrolled zillion telekinesis, a beginner's mistake. She hadn't made a mistake like that since she was a child. There was only one mechanic in North Creek, a fact she knew from the careful study of her surroundings. Calling him meant interaction. It meant letting a stranger into their fragile, isolated world. It was a risk, but with their supplies running low, it was a necessary one. Her hands shook as she dialed the number from an old, grease-stained business card she'd found pinned to the community board at the town's only grocery store. Ryder's Auto. Jack speaking. The voice was calm, deep, with a low rumble that seemed to vibrate right through the phone. "Hello," Lena said, her own voice, tight. "My truck. It won't start. It was running, and then it just stopped. Where are you located?" She gave him the address to the cabin, nestled deep in the woods off a forgotten logging road. There was a pause on the other end. "That's pretty far out," he said, not with annoyance, but with a note of curiosity. "I can be there in about an hour. That work for you?" "Yes. Thank you." She hung up before she could say anything else that might betray her nervousness. An hour later, a rugged-looking tow truck, older than her own vehicle but meticulously maintained, rumbled up her gravel driveway. A man swung out of the driver's seat. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his grey, oil-stained work shirt. His dark hair was a little unruly, and he had a few days of stubble on a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that held her. They were a warm, clear hazel, and they seemed to see everything, missing no detail as he surveyed the cabin, the dead truck, and finally her. "Ma'am," he said, with a nod. "I'm Jack Ryder. Let's see what we've got." He moved with an easy, confident grace. Lena watched her arms crossed tightly over her chest as he popped the hood. He was a study in controlled strength, his hands, though calloused and marked with grease, moving with a surprising precision over the engine components. He worked quietly for a few minutes, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Well, this is strange," he finally said, pulling his head out from under the hood. "Your battery's fine. Alternator looks good. But the whole ignition system is fried. It's like it was hit with a massive electrical surge, like a lightning strike, but there's no storm." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know anything about cars." Jack's gaze drifted from the truck to where she stood on the porch. He didn't look suspicious, merely puzzled. Then his eyes fell on the front door, which was slightly ajar. Through the opening, he could see the glittering broken pieces of the music box on the floor. "Everything okay in there?" he asked, his voice softening. Before Lena could answer, Maya, who had been hiding behind the living room curtain, peeked out. Her face was streaked with tear tracks. Jack's expression shifted instantly, a deep well of empathy appearing in his eyes. He offered Maya a small, gentle smile. "Hey there, little one." Maya, usually shy to the point of being invisible around strangers, stepped out onto the porch. She pointed a small finger at the broken sphere. "My music box broke." Lena tensed, ready to pull Maya back, to shut the door and end this encounter. But Jack didn't pry. He simply knelt down, bringing himself to Maya's level. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said softly. "Sometimes things break. But sometimes," he added, his eyes flicking up to Lena, "they can be fixed." He finished his assessment of the truck, telling her he'd need to tow it back to his shop to replace the fried components. As he was hooking it up, he gestured towards the cabin. "That music box," he said, his tone casual, but his focus intent. "Mind if I take a look? I like to tinker. Sometimes I get lucky with things other people can't fix." Every instinct screamed at Lena to say no. The sphere was Zillion technology, a complex lattice of psychoreceptive crystals and quantum mechanics. A human mechanic wouldn't even know where to begin. Yet there was something in his offer, a genuine kindness that disarmed her. And more than that, there was a strange feeling emanating from him, a sense of grounded stillness, of ancient power held in careful check. It was nothing like the cold, sterile energy of her own people, nor the chaotic buzz of humans. It was something else, entirely. Something wild and earthy. He must have seen the conflict on her face. "No pressure," he said, raising his hands. "Just an offer." But Maya ran inside and carefully gathered the two largest pieces of the sphere. She held them out to him with the unwavering faith of a child. "Can you fix it, Mr. Jack? It plays Daddy's song." Jack's gaze softened impossibly. He took the pieces with a reverence that stunned Lena, his large, calloused fingers handling the delicate crystal as if it were spun glass. "I'll do my best, sweetheart," he promised. As his fingers closed around the pieces, Lena saw him flinch just for a second, as if he'd received a static shock. His hazel eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something wild and golden in their depths. He felt it. He felt the residual energy humming within the broken matrix. A human shouldn't have been able to feel that. "What's your name?" he asked Maya, his voice a little rougher than before. "Maya." "Well, Maya," he said, his eyes finding Lena's again, holding them with a new, unnerving intensity. "I promise you I'll take good care of your father's song." As he drove away with her truck in tow, and the heart of her dead world resting on his passenger seat, Lena felt a terrifying mix of hope and dread. She had just handed a piece of her soul to a stranger who felt like a bigger secret than her own. 2 days passed in a tense, suspended quiet. Lena found herself pacing the small cabin, her heightened senses on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every distant snap of a twig sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She was stranded, exposed, and a piece of her past was in the hands of a man she couldn't understand. She kept replaying the moment he'd touched the sphere, the brief shock, the flicker of gold in his eyes. It was a resonance, an energy signature. He was not entirely human. On the third day, Jack's tow truck rumbled back down her driveway. He wasn't towing her truck. He was driving it. It purred like a contented animal cleaner than she'd ever seen it. He got out a cardboard box in one hand and a small sheepish smile on his face. "Figured it'd be easier to bring it back to you. The ignition system is all new. Should run better than it has in years." "How much do I owe you?" Lena asked, her hand already moving towards the emergency cash she kept hidden. "Let's not worry about that just yet," he said, holding up the box. "First, a progress report." He placed the box on the hood of the truck and opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of soft rags, was the music box. It was still in 2 halves, but the fractured edges had been meticulously cleaned. A series of impossibly fine wires, delicate as spider silk, were clamped to various points on the crystalline matrix, leading to a small, custom-built power cell Jack had jury-rigged. "Now I couldn't get it to play the music," he admitted, looking more frustrated than she would have expected. The internal power source is, well, it's like nothing I've ever seen. It's not dead, just sleeping. But I did manage to get the light working. He flipped a tiny switch on his device. A soft, warm glow pulsed from within the two halves of the sphere, the light of her home system, the light of Kaelin's love. It pulsed in a steady, gentle rhythm, the rhythm of Maya's resting heartbeat, a feature Kaelin had designed into it. Maya gasped beside her, her eyes wide with wonder. Lena felt her own throat tighten. She had been so sure it was lost forever. How? Lena whispered, truly stunned. The wiring, the energy matrix. It's not human technology. Jack's smile didn't falter, but his eyes were sharp, observant. I've always been good with puzzles, he said, his answer both simple and evasive. And I could feel it. The way the energy was supposed to flow. It just needed a little nudge to wake up. He could feel it. The words confirmed her suspicions. He was a sensitive an anomaly. It made him more dangerous, but as she looked at the genuine pride on his face, the gentle way he looked at her daughter's awestruck expression, she found it hard to feel fear. "Stay for dinner," she heard herself say, the words tumbling out before her logical mind could stop them. As payment. For the toe, the parts. For this. He looked surprised, then pleased. I'd like that very much. The evening was a strange, delicate dance of discovery. Jack was easy to talk to, drawing her out with gentle questions about where she was from. She gave him the practiced, vague answers she gave everyone, a small, isolated town up north that was wiped out by a wildfire. It was a story of loss he seemed to accept without question. In turn, he spoke of his own life. He had been born and raised in North Creek. He'd inherited the garage from his father. He spoke of the woods with a deep, abiding love, describing the patterns of the seasons, the tracks of animals, the feeling of running under a full moon. When he said that, his eyes took on that distant golden sheen again. He never mentioned family. Lena, sensing a wound, didn't ask, but as he helped Maya trace the glowing lines on the mended sphere, she saw a profound sadness in him, a loneliness that mirrored her own. Later, after Maya was asleep, they sat on the porch, the cool night air, alive with the sound of crickets. "You're not from around here," he said, quietly, not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. "And I don't just mean another state." Lena's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you mean." "It's okay," he said, turning to face her. The faint porch light cast his face in shadow, but his eyes were luminous. "Everyone's got secrets, Lena. I know that better than anyone. Some of us are just better at hiding to them. But when you're out here, alone, raising a kid, secrets get heavy." He paused, his gaze dropping to his own hands. "I lost my wife and son a few years back. Car accident on a slick road. There's a quiet that comes after a loss like that." A silence. "I see the same silence in you." His confession was a key, unlocking a door she had kept sealed for 5 years. He wasn't prying. He was offering a bridge between their two solitudes. She didn't tell him the truth, not the whole truth, but she told him about Kaelin. She told him he was a brilliant scientist, an artist, that he had built the music box for Maya before she was born. She told him he had died protecting them. As she spoke, the weight on her chest lessened just for a moment. "He sounds like he was a good man," Jack said, his voice thick with empathy. "He was," she whispered. As he stood to leave, he hesitated at the steps. "My family." He began choosing his word carefully. "They can be a little overprotective. Our leader, Marcus Thorne, he worries about outsiders." He felt something a few days ago, an energy surge out this way. He warned me to be careful. Lena froze. Marcus Thorne. The name was powerful resonant. The Alpha. He felt something. They knew. Or at least they suspected. "You should be careful, Jack," she said, her voice barely audible. "Some secrets are heavy enough to crush anyone who gets too close." His gaze was intense, unwavering. "Some things are worth the risk." He left her standing on the porch, her heart a tangled mess of gratitude and terror. She had found a crack of light in her lonely darkness, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the light was attracting the attention of more than just a kind mechanic. It was attracting the attention of a wolf pack. The fragile peace Jack's visit had created lasted less than 24 hours. The next afternoon, while gathering firewood at the edge of her property, Lena felt a shift in the air. It was a chilling sensation, a sudden drop in the ambient psychic temperature. The birds fell silent. The squirrels vanished. It was the absolute stillness of prey that has scented a predator. Her zillion senses, honed by years of hypervigilance, screamed a single silent warning. "Hunter." She straightened up, her body going rigid. Scanning the dense line of pine and fir trees, she saw nothing but she could feel him. A cold, disciplined mind, utterly devoid of empathy. It was a mental signature she hadn't felt since the fall of her world, a presence that haunted her nightmares. She grabbed Maya's hand, who was drawing patterns in the dirt nearby. Inside. Now she ordered her voice, low and urgent. "But Mummy now, Maya." They scrambled inside the cabin, and Lena bolted the door, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She peered through a gap in the curtains. A man emerged from the tree line, moving with an unnatural smoothness that didn't disturb a single pine needle on the forest floor. He was tall and thin, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that was bizarrely out of place in the rugged wilderness. His hair was silver, slicked back from a high forehead, and his face was all sharp angles and pale skin. He stopped at the edge of her driveway, his head tilted, as if listening to something no one else could hear. His eyes, the color of a frozen lake, scanned the cabin with an unnerving intensity. This was not a human. This was a zillion enforcer. Lena's blood turned to ice. It was him. Kyle. The same man who had led the assault on Kalen's laboratory. The man whose face was the last thing she had seen as she fled her burning home world. How had he found her? The broken music box. Her emotional outburst must have been a flare in the void, a signal powerful enough to cross interstellar distances, a cry for help that had summoned a demon. He took a slow, deliberate step onto her property. Lena grabbed Maya and pulled her into the small bedroom, shoving her under the bed. "Stay here. Do not make a sound no matter what you hear. Do you understand me?" "Maya," she commanded, her voice shaking but firm. Maya, seeing the raw terror in her mother's eyes, nodded, her own eyes wide with fear. Lena crept back to the main room, her mind racing. The cabin offered no real defense. Her own abilities were purely defensive, small telekinetic shoves, mental shields. She was a scientist, not a warrior. Kyle was the pinnacle of Xylian martial training, a being bred for pursuit and termination. There was a sharp, commanding rap on the door. Not a knock, a summons. Lyra, his voice, cut through the wood, clear and precise, using her Xylian name. It was devoid of accent, devoid of any emotion at all. "Open this door. The High Council has shown immense patience. Your period of mourning is over. The keystone must be returned." The keystone, not a music box, not a toy. They were after it for its true purpose. Kalen had built it not just as a memory, but as a key, a device capable of unlocking a pocket dimension of pure energy he had discovered. In the right hands, it could power a civilization. In the wrong hands, it could be a weapon of unimaginable destruction. "I don't know what you're talking about," she called out, her voice trembling. "Do not insult my intelligence." "Scientist," Kael's voice was flat bored. "I can feel its resonance. I can feel your pathetic emotional residue all over this pathetic mudball. You have 10 seconds to comply before I dismantle this wooden shack plank by plank." Panic seized her. She looked around desperately. There was no escape. He would be on her in an instant. Then her eyes landed on the phone. There was only one person she could call, one person who might understand that the world was more complex than it seemed. One person who had felt the energy of the keystone and hadn't run. Her fingers flew across the keypad, her hand shaking so badly she could barely press the numbers. It rang once, twice. Ryder's auto, Jack's voice, a lifeline. The cabin door shuddered as Kael struck it. The wood groaned, splintering around the lock. "Jack," she breathed into the phone, her voice a desperate whisper. "He's here. Someone is here. You were right to be worried. Help me, please." There was a deafening crash as the door flew off its hinges, torn from the frame, as if it were paper. Kael stood in the doorway, his icy eyes fixing on her, a faint, cruel smile playing on his thin lips. "Time's up, Lyra," he said, stepping inside. Through the phone before the line went dead, as the device was ripped from her hand by an unseen force, Lena heard Jack's voice, no longer calm and gentle, but a deep, guttural snarl that was barely human. "I'm coming." Kael advanced into the small room, his movements fluid and predatory. The air grew cold around him. "Where is it?" he demanded, his gaze sweeping the cabin, dismissing Lena as if she were little more than an insect. "It's gone." Lena lied, her body trembling as she backed away. "It was destroyed." Kael's smile was thin and sharp, a lie born of sentiment. Kaelin's folly was always his belief in such useless things. "He imbued the keystone with your daughter's biosignature. It cannot be destroyed as long as the child lives. Now give it to me." He raised a hand, and the floorboards around Lena's feet groaned. A telekinetic grip, cold and immense, closed around her, lifting her effortlessly into the air. The pressure was crushing, squeezing the air from her lungs. Her own weak shields buckled and shattered against his raw power. "I will retrieve the child next," Kael stated calmly. "And I will peel the information from her mind, layer by layer. It will be unpleasant." The threat to Maya ignited something within Lena. It wasn't logic or strategy. It was pure primal rage. Her fear coalesced into a point of white-hot energy. With a scream of defiance, she unleashed it. It wasn't a powerful blast, but it was focused. The collection of kitchen knives in the block on the counter flew through the air, a volley of desperate, useless steel. Kael didn't even flinch. He gestured dismissively, and the knives stopped in mid-air inches from his face before clattering harmlessly to the floor. The pressure on Lena intensified. Black spots danced in her vision. Suddenly, a thunderous roar ripped through the forest, a sound of such raw fury that the very windows of the cabin rattled. It was not the sound of any known animal. It was deeper, more guttural, a promise of violence from the depths of time. Kael's head snapped towards the ruined doorway, a flicker of surprise crossing his stoic features. A primitive predator. Before he could react, a massive shape burst into the cabin. It was a whirlwind of black fur, muscle, and claws. A wolf, but a wolf of monstrous proportions, easily the size of a grizzly bear with eyes that burned with a furious golden light. Jack. The beast that was Jack slammed into Kael with the force of a freight train. The Zillion enforcer, caught off guard by the sheer physical power, was thrown across the room, crashing into the far wall. The telekinetic grip on Lena vanished, and she dropped to the floor, gasping for air. Kyle recovered with inhuman speed, his suit miraculously untorn. He looked at the giant wolf, his expression shifting from surprise to cold academic curiosity. Fascinating. A lycanthropic alpha. This planet is more infested than our intelligence suggested. The wolf Jack let out another guttural snarl, positioning his body between Kyle and Lena, a clear and unmistakable act of protection. His lips were pulled back to reveal teeth like daggers. "You have no quarrel with me, creature," Kyle said, straightening his suit jacket. He raised his hand again, and a shimmering field of energy appeared in the air before him. "I am here for the Zillion fugitive and the artifact." Jack didn't wait for another attack. He lunged a blur of motion. But Kyle was prepared. He sidestepped the savage attack and pressed his hand against the wolf's flank. There was a sound like high-voltage electricity, and Jack howled in pain, his fur smoking as the energy shield discharged into him. He was thrown back, hitting the floor with a heavy thud, a large patch of his fur seared away to reveal burned skin beneath. Lena watched in horror. Jack was powerful, but Kyle's technology and training were beyond him. He was going to be killed. The wolf struggled to its feet, shaking its massive head, a low whine of pain escaping its throat. It was injured, but the fire in its golden eyes had not diminished. It was ready to die to protect them. Seeing Jack's pained, defiant stance, seeing the creature he was, and the choice he had made, solidified something in Lena. She could not let him die for her. She was a Zillion. She had a mind, not just claws. While Kale was focused on the wounded wolf, Lena scrambled to her feet. She focused all her will not on an attack, but on a single complex object, the makeshift charging station Jack had built for the Keystone. It sat on the small table by the wall. She poured every ounce of her remaining energy into one command: overload. The device sparked. The wires glowed red-hot. With a sharp crack, the power cell exploded, sending a wave of concussive force and a brilliant flash of blue-white light through the cabin. Kyle cried out, shielding his sensitive Zillion eyes. The wolf, momentarily blinded, staggered back. The blast was just enough of a distraction. "Jack the window," Lena screamed. The wolf, responding to her voice, even through its pain, turned and hurled its massive body through the cabin's largest window, shattering the frame and glass. Lena ran to the bedroom, scooped up a terrified but silent Maya from under the bed, and followed him out into the chaos of the woods, not daring to look back. Behind them, recovering his sight, Kyle stepped through the shattered window frame, his cold eyes scanning the dark forest. The hunt had just begun, and now he had two fascinating new specimens to capture. The forest was a dark, confusing maze, but the giant wolf moved through it with unerring confidence. Despite his injury, Jack ran with a desperate speed, Lena clutching a silent Maya in her arms as she struggled to keep up. The sounds of pursuit faded behind them, either because Kyle had lost their trail or because he was choosing to let them run. Lena suspected the latter. Jack led them deep into the oldest part of the woods, to a place where the trees were ancient behemoths and the ground was a soft carpet of moss. He finally slowed, limping heavily, and guided them towards a sheer rock face hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines. He nudged the vines aside with his head, revealing a dark opening, the entrance to a cave. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of damp earth and something else, something musky and wild. It was a den. Jack collapsed onto the floor, his massive form shrinking and contorting with a series of sickening cracks and groans. In moments, the giant wolf was gone, and a naked, wounded Jack Ryder lay panting on the cave floor, a severe burn marking his ribs and side. Lena quickly set Maya down her scientific mind, overriding her fear. She tore strips from the hem of her own shirt, her hands surprisingly steady. "Don't move," she commanded, softly approaching him. She gently cleaned the wound with the water from the canteen. She always carried her touch, surprisingly gentle. Jack flinched, but didn't pull away his hazel eyes, watching her with a mixture of pain and wonder. You're not scared of me," he rasped. "I am terrified," Lena corrected him, her voice trembling slightly as she wrapped the makeshift bandage around his torso. "But not of you. Of him. What was he? And what are you?" So in the dim, quiet sanctuary of the cave, the secrets finally came out. He went first. He told her he was a werewolf, born and bred. His pack, the North Creek Pack, had been guardians of this territory for generations. He wasn't just a man who turned into a wolf. The wolf was a part of him, an ancient spirit intertwined with his soul. Their leader, Marcus Thorne, was his uncle, the alpha of their small, tight-knit pack. They protected the forest from threats both mundane and supernatural. "Marcus felt your arrival," Jack explained. "A surge of strange energy. He thought you might be a threat. I was supposed to investigate you to see if you were dangerous." He gave a short, pained laugh. "Turns out you are. You attract a very bad crowd." Then it was Lena's turn. She looked at Maya, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep, curled up on a bed of dry leaves. Taking a deep breath, she told him everything. She told him about Xylos, a world of scientists and thinkers who had suppressed their emotions to achieve intellectual purity. She told him about her mate, Kaelin, and about the political faction led by Kael, who wanted to weaponize Kaelin's discoveries. She told him the truth of the music box, that it was the keystone, a key to a dimension of infinite energy. Kaelin encoded it to Maya's biosignature and my emotional frequency. She finished her voice, a whisper. "It can only be fully activated by us together. That's why Kyle needs us alive. He wants to force us to open it for him." Jack absorbed this, his expression grim. "So he won't stop. He'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." "He won't have to," Lena said bleakly. "We're trapped here." As if on cue, a low growl echoed from the mouth of the cave. A man stood there, silhouetted against the fading daylight. He was older than Jack, with streaks of silver in his dark hair and an air of absolute authority. His eyes, a piercing dark brown, were fixed on Lena. Behind him, two other figures, a man and a woman, watched with undisguised suspicion. Jack the man said, his voice a low rumble of command. "What have you brought into our den, Marcus?" "Wait," Jack said, struggling to sit up. "She's not a threat. She needs our help." Marcus Thorne stepped into the cave, his gaze sweeping over Lena and Maya, his nostrils flaring as he took in their alien scent. His eyes were hard, unforgiving. He was the alpha, and his judgment was law. "She is an outsider." Marcus declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Her presence brought a hunter to our lands and got you injured. The pack comes first, always. She is a danger to us all. The hunter is after her." And the kid Jack argued, getting to his feet, wincing as he put a hand to his bandaged side. "He's a threat to the whole forest, to everything we protect. We have to fight him. Together. We do not fight alien wars." Marcus snarled. "Our duty is to this land, to our kind, not to strays from other worlds." He looked at Lena with cold dismissal. "You will leave at sunrise. We will not harbor you. Jack, you have allowed your sentiment to cloud your judgment. You are confined to the den until she is gone." The finality in his tone was like a stone wall. Lena looked from Marcus's unyielding face to Jack's defiant one. She had escaped one predator, only to find herself in a den of another kind, trapped by a rigid code that saw her not as a refugee, but as a contagion. She and Maya were alone again, with a relentless hunter closing in, and their only potential allies turning their backs. The glimmer of hope she had felt was extinguished, replaced by the cold certainty of their doom. The night was long and cold. Lena sat with her back against the rough cave wall, watching Maya sleep. Jack sat near the entrance, a silent, brooding guardian, his uncle's command hanging between them like a shroud. The other pack members had brought him clothes and food, which he shared with Lena, but their glares were a constant reminder of her status as an unwelcome outsider. Lena's mind, the scientist's mind, was working furiously. Kyle was logical, predictable. He wouldn't risk a direct assault on the pack's central territory, not without knowing their full strength. He would try to lure her out, isolate her, and he would use her greatest weakness, Maya. As dawn approached, casting a pale grey light into the cave, Jack finally spoke. "I won't let him send you away," he said, his voice a low growl. "I'll leave with you, and be an outcast from the only family you have ever known," Lena countered softly. "No, Jack, you have already risked too much." "It's not a risk," he said, his hazel eyes intense. "It's a choice. Marcus is wrong. Protecting you is protecting our home." Before she could reply, a howl echoed through the woods. It wasn't a cry of greeting, it was an alarm. A few moments later, the female wolf from the night before, whose name Lena had learned was Clara, appeared at the cave entrance, shifting back into her human form. "Marcus wants to see you," she said to Lena, her tone clipped and hostile. Now, flanked by Clara and another pack member, Lena was led to a central clearing. Marcus stood waiting. His arms crossed his face, a mask of grim authority. The rest of the small pack, about a dozen in total, were gathered, their expressions ranging from curious to openly antagonistic. "The hunter has made his move," Marcus announced, his voice carrying through the clearing. "He has taken one of ours. Young Thomas. He was on patrol at the southern border." Marcus's gaze drilled into Lena. The alien left a message, a trade, the boy for the mother and child. A wave of sickness washed over Lena. Kyle had done exactly as she'd predicted. He had taken a hostage. A cold fury rose among the pack, their angry murmurs and growls directed at her. She was the cause. She was the blight. "The exchange is to take place at Raven's Peak at noon." Marcus continued. "You will go. Alone." It was a death sentence. No, Jack's voice roared from the cave entrance. He strode into the clearing, defying his uncle's command. "You can't. It's a trap. He'll kill her and the boy. The safety of the pack is my only concern," Marcus retorted, his eyes flashing with alpha dominance. "We will get Thomas back. This is the only way to ensure the threat leaves our territory for good. By sacrificing a woman and her child," Jack snarled, stepping in front of Lena protectively. "That's not protection, Marcus. That's cowardice." The clearing fell silent. No one challenged the alpha. Marcus's face darkened with rage. "You forget your place, nephew." "No," Jack said, his voice ringing with conviction. "I'm finally remembering it. Our duty is to protect the innocent." "That's what my father believed. It's what you used to believe." Lena watched the confrontation, but her mind was elsewhere. Raven's Peak, an exchange, a trap. Kyle didn't want a trade. He wanted an audience. He wanted her and Maya with the keystone in an open, vulnerable location, and he would use the opportunity to eliminate the pack whom he now viewed as an infestation and a complication. She stepped forward past Jack. "He's right," Lena said, her voice clear and strong, surprising everyone, including herself. "Kyle won't honor the deal. He will kill the boy regardless. He will try to kill you all. He sees you as primitive beasts, an impurity to be cleansed from this world before he leaves with his prize." She looked directly at Marcus, appealing not to his heart, but to his strategic mind as an alpha. But I have the prize, and I know how he thinks. We can use that. We can set a trap of our own. Marcus stared at her, his expression unreadable. He saw not a weeping, frightened refugee, but a calm, intelligent strategist. He saw a mother willing to become a weapon to protect her child. "What do you propose?" he asked, the ice in his voice, cracking just a fraction. Lena laid out her plan. It was audacious, dangerous, and it required a level of trust he had been unwilling to give. She would go to the exchange, but not alone. The pack would be hidden, waiting. The keystone was the key. She explained how its power worked, how it responded to her emotions and Maya's biosignature. Kaelin built in a fail-safe. She explained a spark of inspiration igniting in her mind, a destructive resonance. If I flood the matrix with a specific emotional frequency, pure protective rage, while Maya is in direct contact with it, I can trigger a contained energy cascade. It won't be a weapon of mass destruction, but a targeted burst, enough to overload his technology, his shields, maybe even him. But I have to be close. Very close. And I will need a distraction. The plan was desperate, bordering on suicidal, but it was a plan of attack, not surrender. It was the way of the wolf. Marcus looked from Lena to Jack, whose face shone with pride. He saw the fire in her eyes, the steel in her spine. She was not a stray. She was a lioness, a wolf mother in her own right. He had a choice: stick to his rigid law and risk his pack, or trust an alien and fight for their home. Clara Marcus barked. Take the child somewhere safe, deep underground. Jack, you're with me. The rest of you, you know your positions. Let's go hunting. It was a reluctant acceptance, a grudging alliance. But as Lena met Jack's grateful gaze, she knew it was enough. The final battle was coming. Atop Raven's Peak, a mother's love would be pitted against a hunter's cold ambition, and the fate of two worlds would be decided by a broken music box and its final terrible song. The wind on Raven's Peak was cold, whipping away the last traces of ozone and energy from the Keystone's final terrible song. Below, the pack moved with a quiet efficiency, tending to the minor wounds sustained in the ambush and securing the shaken but unharmed Thomas. The young wolf looked at Lena with wide, awe-filled eyes, a stark contrast to the suspicion he'd held just hours before. Jack stood beside her, his warmth a solid, reassuring presence against the chill. He gently took her hand, his calloused fingers lacing through hers. His touch was an anchor in the dizzying aftermath of the battle. She had spent 5 years running, hiding, existing in a state of perpetual fear. Now the hunter was gone. The threat was neutralized. The silence that followed was not the heavy, oppressive silence of solitude, but the clean, quiet peace of true safety. Marcus Thorne approached them, his movements slow and deliberate. He stopped before Lena, his stern alpha face etched with a complex mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something she had never expected to see from him, respect. Your plan was sound, he said, the words seeming to cost him some effort. Your courage is that of a wolf. It was the highest compliment he could offer a formal declaration of acceptance. He glanced at their joined hands, then at his nephew's proud, steadfast expression. You saved one of our own. You saved all of us. The debt is paid. You and the child are welcome in our territory. You are under the protection of the North Creek Pack. Lena felt the tension she had carried in her shoulders for 5 years begin to dissolve. Tears welled in her eyes, but for the first time, they were not tears of sorrow or fear. They were tears of relief. Thank you, Marcus, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack squeezed her hand. Welcome home, Lena. The months that followed were a time of gentle healing and quiet discovery. Lena and Maya moved from the isolated cabin into a larger, sturdier one, closer to the heart of the pack's territory, a home that Jack and his pack brothers helped build. The silence that had defined their lives was replaced by the warm hum of a community. Maya, no longer a girl of hushed whispers, blossomed. She played in the woods with the other pack children, her laughter echoing through the ancient pines, a sound more beautiful to Lena than any zillion melody. Lena found her own place within the pack's intricate society. Her scientific mind, once used to devise ways to hide, was now employed to help. She introduced advanced crop rotation techniques to the pack's gardens, using her knowledge of botany to increase their yields. She helped repair and improve their machinery, her delicate work with zillion crystals, translating surprisingly well to the complex engines and generators they relied on. She was no longer Lyra, the fugitive scientist. She was Lena, a respected member of their family. Her relationship with Jack deepened with the turning of the seasons. Their bond, forged in crisis and secrecy, was now allowed to grow in the soft light of peace. They spent long evenings on her porch, talking for hours, sharing the stories of their pasts, of a world with 2 suns, and of a life dedicated to the moon. He showed her the wild beauty of his world, taking her to hidden waterfalls and showing her how to track a deer through the dense undergrowth. In turn, she told him of the constellations in a sky he would never see, explaining the physics of dying stars and nascent galaxies. One cool autumn evening, as a hunter's moon hung low and bright in the sky, Jack took her to the edge of a serene lake, its surface a perfect mirror of the cosmos. "I never thought this was possible," he said quietly, his arm wrapped around her as they looked out at the water. "After I lost my family, the wolf was all I had left. It was a creature of grief, of anger. I didn't think I could ever feel whole again." "I know that feeling," Lena replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I was a ghost, a memory. I was so focused on surviving that I forgot how to live. You and Maya, you reminded me." He turned to her, his hazel eyes luminous in the moonlight, the golden fire of the wolf within him, now a warm, steady glow. "I love you, Lena. Not because you're from another world, or because you're brave or brilliant. I love you for who you are, the woman who wept for a broken toy, who fought a monster to save her child, who looks at the stars and sees home." Lena's heart, a heart she had once believed, was purely an organic pump swelled with an emotion so powerful it felt like a supernova. "And I love you, Jack Ryder, the man who saw a stranger's pain and offered to fix it, the wolf who stood between me and the darkness." She rose on her toes and kissed him a kiss that was not born of desperation or fear, but of profound love and a shared promise of a future. The next day, she and Maya took the now inert Keystone to the highest cliff on Raven's Peak. It was just a pretty broken piece of crystal now, its power spent, its song silenced forever. It was a relic of a dead world and a painful past. Together, mother and daughter built a small cairn of stones and placed the 2 halves within it, a monument to the man who had made it and the love that had created their family. As they stood there hand in hand, Jack walked up to join them, placing his hands on their shoulders. The 3 of them stood as one, a strange and wonderful family forged between worlds. Lena looked up at the vast, star-dusted sky. She no longer saw it as an empty void from which hunters could emerge. She saw the pinprick light of her old home and felt not sorrow, but a sense of peace. Her past was there, but her future was here, on this wild, beautiful planet, her feet planted firmly on the earth, her heart protected by a wolf, her hand held by her daughter. They were safe, They were loved. They were home. The battle on Raven's Peak was short, brutal, and changed everything. With the pack's perfectly timed assault providing the distraction she needed, Lena, with the keystone humming in her hands, confronted Kale. In that final desperate moment, she poured all her love, all her fear, and all her protective fury for her daughter into the crystalline sphere. The keystone didn't play a melody, it screamed. A wave of pure, concentrated energy erupted from it, shattering Kale's shields and turning the hunter into little more than dust on the wind. The keystone itself, its power expended, went dark and cold forever, finally just a broken toy. They rescued the young wolf, and the pack, having witnessed Lena's courage, looked at her with newfound respect. Marcus Thorne. The stern alpha gave a slow nod of acceptance. They were no longer outsiders. They were allies. They were survivors. They were home. What do you think of Lena's journey? Do you believe trust can be found in the most unexpected places? This story shows that family isn't about blood or planet of origin, but about the bonds we forge in the fires of adversity and the choices we make to protect one another. If you were moved by the story of the alien mum and the werewolf mechanic, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story of courage and unlikely love, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more tales that explore the wild hidden corners of the heart. Click that notification bell so you won't miss our next adventure.